I recently released the level Heavensward, and while you may have enjoyed the scenic visuals or jiggly animations, here's something you might not know. Heavensward uses a completely custom physics engine for its movement. There are no player physics involved whatsoever. In fact, I actually shoved the players in this box here where they belong, hopelessly power scaled by this little guy here. Some of you might remember that 8 years ago, I made a video explaining the code behind my Tic Tac Toe AI, so I figured why not make another video like that for the people who like to learn about the technical side of projects like this. In this video, I'll show you how the movement engine works behind the scenes, give you some development history, and tell you about why I hate slopes so much. If that sounds cool to you, stick around, though I will warn you this video will be highly technical, much more so than the original. Let's get started. Creating physics in Geometry Dash sounds complicated, and in many ways it is. My system, however, is, at its core, pretty simple. Let's start at a conceptual level. You, the player, want to jump at a specific angle. Taking the angle, we can calculate a movement vector, which is basically just a line from your character to another point, with length equaling strength. Point A is the player, and point B is the destination, so to speak. Once you've established these 2 points, you're basically there. The player simply moves towards the end of the vector at a constant speed over a really long time. Are we forgetting something? Yes, gravity. While moving, simply apply a stacking downward force every frame until you either cap out in speed or hit the ground. In simpler terms, draw a line, follow the line, and get pulled downwards while following it. Let's get a little bit more in depth and explain how each of these steps works in the game itself. This section will be a bit more math heavy, so I hope you paid attention in school. The very first thing I had to implement was the ability to calculate and create these movement vectors. The solution is a circle. As the player, you select an angle to jump at, the direction, of course, being contained in an arc, or rather part of a circle. The end point of every jump can be mapped out around the circumference of a circle, which gives us a starting point to work from. In my movement engine, all jumps start by calculating a ratio of x and y movement. For example, a perfectly vertical jump would have a ratio of 0.0x and 1.0y because you're only moving directly up. On the flip side, a jump going directly to the left would have a ratio of 1.0x and 0.0y because you aren't moving up at all. What if you want to jump at a 25-degree angle? You need to move at a rate of 0.41x and 0.91y, but how do we calculate that? The answer is trigonometry. If you ever slept in math class because you thought, why would I ever need any of this nonsense? Well, here you go. If we draw a circle around our player with an imaginary radius of 1, finding any point along the circle is found with 2 equations. X equals cosine of theta and y equals sine of theta. Let's go back to that 25-degree angle example. There's multiple steps to take, first of which is converting your angle in degrees to this funny looking thing by doing this and plugging it into each of the dimensional equations. Here's our first fun GD quirk. Sine and cosine don't exist in game. You can't calculate it natively, so you have to do it manually by doing what is called the Taylor expansion, which is basically this. Plugging in everything gives us our answer. For angle 25, we intersect with our circle at 0.41x and 0.91y. So that was a ton of math. What happens now? Well, more math. This next step is surprisingly easy though. Let's make our ratios useful. In my engine, when a jump occurs, the player follows 2 objects, one on the x and one on the y. This averages the movement out to reach the correct angle. The base numbers I came up with were 6,000x and 10,000y. What this means is that our 25-degree jump, we multiply the ratio times the base number. The player will move to a point 2,473 x units away and 9,095 y units away. You may be wondering why the numbers are different, and the answer is honestly vibes. I tested this level a lot, and having vertical strength be higher than horizontal strength simply felt better. If you're curious, this is what the game looks like when the numbers are the same. I think it's pretty silly looking and very unpleasant to control. We're not quite out of the woodwork yet, unfortunately. We have all of our numbers calculated, and now for the hard part, actually doing it in Geometry Dash. For the trigger savvy among you, you may know that in GD, you can't just move an object by a variable amount. Let's say I code a move trigger to move 2,473 x units. What happens when I need to jump at 26 degrees, 2,565 x units instead? I'm simply out of luck. That is, until we use binary. You might be thinking, what is this guy going on about? He has finally lost it. What the heck does binary have to do with GD? Well, binary is a number system to represent numbers with. If you're unfamiliar with it, here's the basics. The number 9 in binary is 1001. But why? Each digit in binary represents a power of 2 switched on or off, then added together. So if we expand out each digit in binary to represent 1, 2, 4, 8, then add every digit represented by a 1, the numbers add up to the number 9 in base 10. What about the number we calculated, 2,473? 2,473 in binary is 1001101010001. Man, maybe I really have lost it. Expanding all the numbers and adding up all the ones gets us back to 2,473. Why does any of this matter? Well, conversion from decimal to binary and binary to decimal can be calculated using a set number of discrete steps. When we dynamically convert numbers and reconstruct them, every digit becomes a set action. This may be hard to conceptualize, but if we took that same 2,473 number, convert it to binary, and then back again, as we're converting it back, we could make each conversion step move the object by that amount as well. Moving an object by 2048, then 256, then 128, then 32, then 8, then 1 is exactly the same as moving it directly by 2,473, except I can plug in any number and it'll be able to move by that amount dynamically. Converting to binary is pretty simple. It's just a 2-step process per bit in your number. Divide a number by 2. If the floor of that number is not equal to the ceiling of that number, that digit is a 1 in binary. Then repeat however many times you want. I made my converter to handle up to 16 bits, giving it a total maximum range of 65,535, far exceeding anything you'll experience in-game. The converter is very efficient. It converts to binary and immediately unconverts it by instantly moving the target block by that much in decimal, repeating that a total of 16 times, once per direction. There's one last thing to account for, and that's jump strength. Thankfully, this one's extremely simple. In my engine, there's a total of 10 jump strengths. When you hold down the jump button, every 10th of a second your distance is multiplied by 1.08 up to 10 times. So if I held down my 2,473 unit jump into a max strength jump, the number just gets multiplied into 5,330, or approximately 2,473 times 1.08 to the 10th power. I think we're finally ready to jump now, so let's take a step back and examine the whole process. First, we choose an angle, let's say 40 degrees, then find the dimensional ratios 0.63 and 0.77. Then, multiply that by our base distance number to get 3,765 and 7,687 respectively. When we hold the jump button to max strength, the numbers become 8,122x and 16,588y. Releasing the jump button feeds those numbers into the binary machine, dynamically moving two objects, the X target and the Y target blocks, causing the player to begin to follow them with a simple follow move. Would you look at that? We're now flying away into space, albeit at the correct angle. Let's talk about gravity. As I mentioned before, gravity is very simple. While we're moving in the air, every single frame a stacking downward force is applied up to a certain speed. When in the air, the velocity the player is moving at starts to get tracked. Using this number, we can easily tell when we're going too fast to continue applying gravity. In my engine, one frame of gravity is a force of negative 150 y units applied to the player continually until a velocity of negative 22,500 is reached. The code for it couldn't be any more simple. Every frame, if terminal velocity hasn't been exceeded yet, stack another gravity move instance and subtract the total velocity variable by that much. The end result is a satisfying arc motion on every jump. Congratulations! We've officially implemented jumping, and it certainly wasn't easy either. Designing this whole process in-game took me about a day because it's basically just pure math. We still have a lot of physics to design yet, but at this point we have every variable we need to design the rest, which brings me to the collisions. Equally as important as the movement itself is the ability to interact with the environment. We have the ability to jump, but not to actually do anything beyond that, which brings us to collisions. Collisions are simple in the sense that everything is already built into the engine, it's just figuring out the numbers. Before we can do anything else, let's take a look at the player behind the scenes. If we take the player model and strip away all the visuals, we're left with this cluster of hitboxes. It's quite a mess, but they all serve a unique, important purpose. Moving away the 5 and 7 blocks gives us the true player hitbox. Structuring the player to interact uniquely with each player face is far easier than trying to interact with unique faces of a block. Every single block in Heavensward is one single hitbox, the 6 hitbox. The physics changed based on which player hitbox hits the 6 block. For example, if block 1 intersects with the 6 block, that's the player hitting a ceiling. The same goes for the other 3 as well. Once the player jumps, every face of the player checks for collisions every frame. Let's break down some of the base functions, the simplest of which is landing. If the 3 block touches the 6 block, the player is landing. Stop all movement, reset all variables, and level the player out so that it's just above the block you landed on. The code for landing is really complex because of how many miscellaneous functions run every time you land, but the logic is very simple: stop. Walls are where we begin to introduce math again. If you hit a wall by intersecting the 2 or 4 blocks with a 6 block, what do you think should happen? Well, of course you'd bounce off the wall, but how do we accomplish that? Like I mentioned earlier, all the base functions of the engine are made to handle this. If we want to bounce off the wall, take the current player X velocity, invert it, then feed it back into the binary movement machine. The engine will stop and reset the X target block, take the inverted number, recalculate, move the target block, and follow it again. The vertical movement remains the same, except the player is moving left instead of right. Reusing the core engine features is highly efficient and extremely quick. Being able to stop movement and start it back again in about 2 frames or so, basically imperceptible. Ceilings work exactly the same, except with the Y variable. If you hit your head on a block, invert your current upward velocity and rerun the number through the Y dimension binary machine with the new number. The result gives you a nice satisfying thud, knocking you down at a proportional speed to what you were moving at. Bounce pads work the same way. Get the absolute value of the current Y velocity and recalculate, bouncing you back up. Vanishing platforms are a fun one. They're very complicated behind the scenes for reasons I won't get into, but the gist of them is that you start a jump with 0 X and Y velocity, so you simply just start falling. Now, it's time for the worst, most difficult one, slopes. Let me just tell you, if there's anything I learned from this entire project, well, I hate slopes! Now, you might wonder, why do I hate slopes? While developing Heavensward early on, I spent genuinely weeks writing and rewriting the code. The entire code went through at least 10 complete revisions until I got something that felt right and worked at a perfect consistency. Every revision I made either felt wrong or had rare bugs that make me rewrite the code completely. Even if it would bug out 1 in every 1,000 slides, across tens of thousands of players doing hundreds of slides, it just simply wouldn't work at all. Slopes are very complicated because it involves a lot of movements at once. Let's start from the beginning. The first thing to note is that slopes use a separate hitbox, the 5 and 7. The 7 block detects you landing on a slope in the first place. Using the ground hitbox would work too, but it worked better with filled out corners. The 5 hitbox is used for the opposite purpose. It's a very large hitbox, basically holding you on the rail, so to speak. It registers that you're still on the slope. When you exit the slope, it won't detect the slope hitbox anymore, and you'll return to normal. When you hit a slope, the first thing that happens is your X velocity is immediately set to the current Y velocity. This puts you at a 45-degree angle relative to your vertical movement. At this point, gravity is modified. You begin receiving gravity ticks of -75 on the Y instead of -150, but also 75 along the X, so you continue to speed up in both directions at once, holding your 45-degree angle. The same speed restrictions apply, just ticking a bit slower. All other hitboxes are disabled during a slope side to prevent any issues. Once you exit a slope, your X velocity is snapshotted and reset to its current value. There are a lot of nuances to this. Gravity stacks alongside your X vector movement, but they're not the same. Snapshotting it clears out the X gravity ticks and adds it to your vector movement, converting it to just pure vector movement. There are a few other scenarios where I do this, like the ceiling bounce snapshots your Y velocity to clear out all Y gravity ticks. There's a few micro adjustments made to the player model as well to fully clear you from accidentally touching the hitbox again in the same frame. So, why did that take so many rewrites? I mean, that didn't sound that bad, right? Well, you may have wondered what the singular purple arrow in my code represents. For the uninitiated, I use arrows to point the flow of code. If something gets spawned, it gets pointed to show a logical progression, making it easier to read. The purple arrow is special. Before I talk about the purple arrow, let's talk about edge cases. Edge cases are the final boss of the movement engine and the thing that took by far the most time to solve out of anything in this entire code. Consider this scenario. You're jumping while below a block. Your horizontal velocity is positive. Your player hitbox is plus-shaped, so while jumping, you clip the 4 hitbox on the 6 block above you, triggering a wall bounce, so the code inverts your horizontal velocity, setting you directly inside of the block. That certainly isn't expected behavior, so how do you prevent it? A lot of red tape. Add a conditional. If you trigger a wall bounce from the left but your horizontal velocity is positive, slip the player model a couple of units to the right. Repeat for the other direction as well. What if you touch a slope perfectly on the corner, so you activate the slope code, but also exit the slope in the same frame? Geometry Dash can't handle this kind of thing on its own, so add an exception to the engine that detects if slope mode is engaged, but the 5 block isn't in a slope for X frames. Then emergency exit the slope before you slide off the map. Here's the hardest one and the reason for the purple arrow, which I'll get to in a moment. You jump and you collide exactly on the intersection of a wall and a slope, triggering both hitbox events in the same frame. I'll tell you right now, it's not pretty. Handling these edge cases is extremely annoying because they're impossible to think of until they happen to you while testing. The purple arrow, which is present on every common hitbox event in the game, points to the hitbox handler, which I think is one of my greatest pieces of code that I've ever made. When a hitbox event is registered, first, 2 counters are incremented by 1. 1 is a general purpose hitbox counter, and 1 serves as a sort of hitbox ID. If you hit a left wall, for example, counters 38 and 39 are set to 1. The system approves it because only 1 hitbox was touched, then detects the ID of the collision, 39, and spawns the rest of the left wall hitbox code. If you hit 2 hitboxes within a 4-frame window, counter 38 is set to 2. The game says, "Oh my god, it's a double hitbox event," and captures both IDs. Instead of slamming through both sets of code at the same time, assuredly breaking something, it passes 1 collision through, then the second 8 frames later. The end result is admittedly a bit jank, but far superior to breaking the engine and soft-locking the player permanently. There is so much more to the engine that I haven't explained here. Little optimizations for smoothness that I made over dozens of hours testing the movement. And don't even get me started on protecting the input system from spamming, another project that took me weeks to solve. Another thing is the animation code, which, as far as I'm aware, is basically just magic from Fungifity, an incredibly talented artist and animator. I'll spare you the rest though, because this video is long enough as it is, and I encourage you to experiment, either on my code or with your own. For those of you who watched this video to understand, I hope you found this video to be insightful. I truly do love trigger coding, and I encourage more people to get into it. A lot of people dislike it due to the jank and bugs, but for me, that's the appeal. Doing something you weren't meant to do in a silly game about jumping over spikes. For those of you who don't know what the heck I'm talking about and just wanted to listen to me ramble on about math for a while on their second monitor, I hope you found this video enjoyable as well. I welcome any of you to open up my level and mess with it. Create your own levels, write your own engine, it's fun. Everyone gets started somewhere and by fiddling with stuff other people made. I remember digging through Sir Punj's 2.0 levels a decade ago and trying to solve the effects and visuals, and I'm all the better for it. Have at it, have fun, and thanks for watching.